Hi, this is Marie Spalding of Living Felt. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a fun and festive project for needle felting these cute little scarecrows. These little guys are only heads, but they are all personality. You could make them with bodies, but even as they are, they would be great on a fall centerpiece or perhaps a table decoration. You could put them on your fall wreath. Or if you're feeling especially festive, you could make them somewhat flat and wear one as a little brooch. We made ours in a primitive or a grubby fashion. You can choose any style you like, but we'll take you through this project from start to finish. So if you're already familiar with needle felting, you could certainly figure this out, and we hope our video serves as a little inspiration project for you. But if you're brand new to needle felting, we'll show you how to do it step by step. So let's get started and let's have some fun. So let's look at some of the supplies and tools that you'll need for this project. We start with Living Felt CW1 core wool, which is a core wool batting, and we use that for the insides of projects so that your dyed wool goes farther. Again, it's called CW1 and it comes in 8-ounce bundles. And for our dyed wool, we'll be using Living Felt MC1 Merino Cross wool batting. It comes in over 70 colors right now, lots and lots of earth tones. This particular one is pecan and is the same color that we used on this little guy's hat. So you can see that. We'll be using a collection of colors. And as an example, you can see we'll be using the core wool to make a ball, and then we'll cover that with our flesh tone. This is, it's just called flesh tone, and it's like a medium Caucasian skin tone. This is caramel, and we'll use this to add a little grubbiness to the face of our scarecrow. I'll be using Egyptian blue for the hat. We're gonna make a tall, skinny hat to show you how to do that. Black for the eyes and the mouth, and then a collection of oranges for the nose and maybe for some adornment on the hat. And you can either use orange or a little bit of pink or a ruddy color to add some color to the cheeks, and I'll show you how we do that. So this one is orange and this guy has some pink, just kind of depends on what you'd like to do. Then we have some yarn that we'll use for the hair. You need just a little bit of that. We'll use some floss for this guy has just floss for his eyebrows. That's not required, of course, just optional. Some scissors. I use tweezers to pull vegetable matter out of the wool. When there's a little bit, it's just a little bit of hay or grass. We'll use a chenille stem for our tall hat to give it some structure and make it easier to needle felt. And the tools I like to use, here's a variety of them. I generally use quite a number of different felting needles when I'm working. So I have a 36, our 38 star, our 40 triangle, our 42 triangle. So this is coarse and getting finer. I also have a 40 spiral. In my tools, I usually keep 2 clover pen tools loaded at least. This one is my spiral. It's the 38 spiral, and maybe if the light is catching, you can see that the shaft is spiraled, and so it crunches and twists the wool as you poke. You'll also see that comparing these two, I've taken off the pink shaft here so I can poke in a little bit further. And this one is loaded with 2 42 triangles, which are the gold needle, because I like to use it for finishing. And then a sewing needle for threading through the embroidery floss for the eyelashes. And this is my 4 needle metal tool. I use that sometimes. And then this is the Clover 5 needle tool, and I'll show you I like to use that to firm up a sphere. So that's about it on the supplies. Let's get started. Okay, so when we make our scarecrows, we're going to start by making the base or the ball for the head, and then we're going to build up from there. We start that with our core wool. And I usually start with a strip that's about 10 or 12 inches long. It doesn't have to be exact. You'll figure out the length and the width based on the size of the sphere you want to make. But if you want to make something really large, it's best to, if you want to make it large and firm, it's best to start with something small and then build up layers. So let's look at what we do here. We start by rolling. I start by rolling just a little bit of a tube and then tuck in the edges towards the center. And then if you can see, I'm pressing down really firmly and just tucking in the edges as I roll. If you've seen our basic shapes video, we also show you how to do this, and we have this laid out in pictorial steps on our blog, just how to needle felt a ball. And so here again, I'm holding it very firmly as I roll. I'm pushing down very hard. So the less distance between the fibers before I start to needle felt, then actually the less I need to felt. And so I'm holding this very, very firmly, and then now I'm going to use my tool with the spiral needles and just start poking. First, I'm going to tack down that area that was loose, and then I'm going to work my way all around the sphere. Because I've taken off that extra pink part, I can actually poke it in quite on purpose. Just remember to keep your eyes on your needles. You don't want to be looking around and looking away, because that's when you'll poke yourself. So work your way all around the sphere. You want to make it nice and firm, but not too hard, because we want to add additional wool and additional items. We don't want it to be fully felted. We just want it to be a good firmness so that it's not too squishy. So I'm going to continue needle felting my ball. Just make sure you work across it in several passes. And again, I'm just going to use my 38 spirals. 38 stars also work great for this. If you have 38 triangles, those will work also. I just like working with at least 2 needles because it makes it go faster. So let's needle felt our ball, and then we'll come right back. Okay, so my ball is fairly needle felted. It's not rock hard, it's still got a little bit of play to it, but only the top layers. The inside's pretty dense, and now we're going to cover it with initially our flesh tone. So we're going to take this white of the core wool, we're going to cover it with flesh tone, and then you can see this is the last color that we'll put just sparsely right on top. So if you look at our scarecrows, he's got, you can see that it's blotchy, which is what I wanted, this being on top and the flesh tone being underneath. And this little guy is a little more fair skinned, so he's got very little of this on top. Just depends on what you want to do. But I like this project because it's fairly imperfect. So now we're going to take our ball and we're just going to cover it with the flesh tone. I'm putting a very thin layer, and you can go ahead, you can wrap it both ways if you want. You can, meaning this way and this way, or you can just patch it on in a moment. That's what we'll do. So I'm going to start by just lightly tacking it down. And then we are going to needle felt this in place until it's fairly smooth, and we'll add the other color on top. So you can see I've put a very thin layer, and I'm just going to keep needle felting it until this layer is fairly smooth. Okay, so our ball is fully covered in the flesh tone, and you can see that it's not finished by any stretch. The wool is still a bit fuzzy, and you can probably see the needle marks, at least in the shadows. But we're going to cover it now with our grungy color, this caramel. We're going to cover it with that, and we're going to smooth all this out. So I've switched out for my 42 triangle. These are the gold needles. I have 2 of those in there. And then we're also going to use this clover tool a little bit, and I'll show you how I use that. So take your color that you want over the top, and again I'm going to keep it fairly sparse, and just stretch it out, leaving some gaps so that you can see the color underneath showing through just as much as you want. And then I'm going to use this tool to needle felt it down. I'm sure if you can see I have a little bit of vegetable matter here, and so I'll just use my tweezers to pull that out. You can do it after you've started felting, or just as soon as you see it. Even sometimes you'll see a fiber, not sure if it's a wool fiber or a guard hair or something, that if you don't want it in there, you can just pull it right out. So that's what the tweezers are good for. So go over your entire sphere. You'll notice I'm not poking in like this anymore. Now I'm just tacking into that surface layer. So we're going to continue firming up this sphere as we needle felt. You can go straight up and down, or you can go at a shallow angle. We'll continue working it until we get all of our needle holes out, and I'll show you that when we switch our tool. So just cover your sphere completely, or as much as you want, with this color. Okay, so now I've covered my sphere as much as I want to with the over color or the caramel MC1, and now I'm going to just flatten it down better and overall compact the fibers better. And for this I'm going to go ahead and use the Clover 5 needle tool. It's also called the 8900 and it's got 5 fine needles in it and this little guard shaft that keeps you from poking yourself. So you basically just set it on your sphere and you poke. And just like with all other tools, I just rotate the ball. And it's kind of noisy. That's the one complaint that most people have about it, is that kind of clacks. And I don't like to use it to start something out, but I really do like it to further firm up a sphere. It's really nice for that. Something about those 5 needles and the proximity of them to each other just works really nicely and allows you to cover the surface area quite methodically. So I'm needle felting all around the ball. Now, of course, you don't need this. When I started, I didn't have any tool like this. I didn't have anything more than holding 2 needles together. So that's totally an option. And this is what I always did before, is I would just hold 2 needles, and you'd see that in this case, I'm just going to poke very shallow. So when I'm finishing a piece, usually I'm using 1 needle, but when we're doing that surface area, I'm just poking very shallow. So decide how you want to do it. Mostly just get the fibers all laying down and try and see where you want the face to go. That's what we're going to do. Next is choose our face and start building that up. So I'm going to keep needle felting just a little bit, and we'll come right back. Okay, so we're going to work on our face a bit, and I've decided that this generally is going to be my facial area, right about here. And you can start with the nose or the eyes as you prefer, and we're just going to do this rather quickly so that you can see how it's done. You might want to just put the eyes in generally where you want them, and you know, they could be fun really close together or really far apart, further down on the face for like a little more of an anime effect, whatever you like. In this case, I'm just going to put them right about there, and I'm going to go ahead and use my 40 triangle. That's my green needle. And all you need to do to make a perfect circle is basically put on that little patch of wool, needle felt it in the center, and then twist. Twist and spin around the needle and then poke back down in so that you're gathering in all those fibers. And just go ahead and shape them until they're round. Twist and twist so that you get all the loose ends up, and then poke them in. So just to make sure that that's where I want my eyes, I'm going to leave them a little loose for the moment. And let's just go ahead and add our nose. So that seems about right. And to add our nose, I'm going to start with, I have 2 oranges here. This is a mandarin orange, and then this one is hot orange. And I'm going to blend them together just a little bit with my hands, and then just put them right on the face. So I'm going to make a carrot shape, and that might be a little bit more wool than I need, but we're going to shape it into the shape of a carrot. So I'm going to make his nose about a little bit taller than his eyes, and I'm just eyeballing it. You could put a template on there if you want, but basically I'm shaping out a triangle with my needle. And then I'm going to fold the edge over with my thumb and needle felt it down right there. Fold this edge over, just kind of shape it, and just needle felt it right into place. So make it long or fat as you want, and then the same with the bottom. Kind of trace out that bottom line, and then if you fold it back up over rather than pull it off, that'll give you an opportunity to give it a nice clean edge. So go ahead and flatten out your nose and your eyes until you're happy with them, and then we'll add just a little more detail. Okay, so we have our nose fairly flattened and our eyes in place, and we're going to add just a little dimension to the nose with our cinnamon brown. This is an orangey brown, and just kind of stretch it out really thin, even roll it into a little thin line and trace it right along the edges of the nose. This is just going to give it a little bit of an outline and a little bit of a dimension, and this color actually accents really well and doesn't just contrast. So be willing to let it be a little bit rustic if you want, and somewhat imperfect will give it a little more character than trying to make it, well, it'll give it a unique character. You could also make it perfect. That would be a particular character. And in this case, we're just going for a little rough around the edges kind of scarecrow. So you can just kind of blend the fibers in and tuck them down. Remember to go at a fairly shallow angle at this point, so no need to make great big puncture marks, and just accent that as much as you want. I want his nose to go ahead and be just a little bit ready. Okay. So once we get those tucked into place, we can add our mouth, and the mouth can either be added with thread or you can add it with wool. And to get a thin strip of wool, just take a little pinch of your black and roll it between your fingers. You're actually dry felting it a little bit, and then decide whether you want him to have a big mouth or a little one. Sometimes they look cute with just a little mouth. It could even be somewhat expressionless, and that can be cute too, or off to the side. So decide how you want your mouth. Again, give it a little bit of a roll. And the edges can be a little bit longer than you want the final one to be. I think I'm going to give him sort of a medium length mouth. I'll go ahead and pull off this very edge, but then these very ends, we'll just tack them right in. So I'll go ahead and use my 42, and then I am lightly going to tack as I go around, keeping that shape, and tack the edges in. So he can be a little bit crooked. And again, you could do that with thread if you prefer. Embroidery thread would work really well. And the same if you want him to have eyebrows. You can either do it with wool, or if you take your embroidery thread and your embroidery floss and a long doll needle, then come up through the bottom or the back. If you're going to put a hat, but it's just going to sit, you can either go through the top or the bottom, because we can cover that with wool. So to give him a bit of an expression, then you just come up through the bottom like that, leave room to tie, and then come out through the other eyebrow, and out through the bottom. So then we're just going to cover that, with wool. So play with it, don't tie them off until you decide where you want them. Get them into place. Okay, so we put our mouth into place, and I have the eyebrows in place, and I just want to show you what we do on the bottom is go ahead and tie a little knot and cut your threads. You don't want to pull it too tight so that the eyebrows are sunken in, but cut those 2 threads, and then you can tuck this into the wool a little bit with your felting needle, and then just take a small patch of wool and just needle felt right over it. If you're sewing the head onto a body, you may not even need to do that. But in this case, we're just going to set it flat on a tabletop. So just patch that over. And now if you want to, you can go ahead and flatten the bottom. And I like to use my 4-needle tool for that. So this is where his head is going to sit. I'm just going to go ahead and flatten that down a little bit. There. That's pretty good. So he's going to sit well. And if you want, now is a good time to go over the entire face. And just spend a little time with shallow pokes. I'm using my 42 triangle, very shallow angles, and just work out all your needle marks. I'm going to spend a little time doing that, but let's add the cheeks. So I want a little readiness on the cheeks. You can take some of your flesh tone. You can even take some of your caramel here, and then blend it either with a little red or a little orange. I'm going to use, in this case, since he's a little on the darker side, I'm going to use some of the hot orange and then feather it in together with your fingers. You're just blending. So we're blending it a little bit so that he has just a little bit of a ruddy cheek. Check the color and see if it's like you want. If not, just add a little bit more. But you'll find that a little bit goes a long way when you're adding color to the cheeks like this. So now we have a little bit of a blend, and we're just going to put it right on the cheeks where we want it. Right underneath the eyes is kind of cute. And they absolutely don't have to be perfect, but what you want is them to be spread out a little bit, and then just tack it down. Shallow, shallow pokes, and don't stay in one place too long so that you get streaks or big dots of color. Just keep it all spread out. Go ahead and tack that down, get the cheeks to how you want them, and then we'll make him a hat. Okay, so our little guy is coming along quite nicely, and it's time to give him a hat. I'm going to go for this sort of stovepipe type hat, or it might even be a hat that you would make out of a pair of pant legs for your Scarecrow. So the first thing we want to do is start with a patch of wool for what would be the brim. And in this case, I'm using our Egyptian blue. And just make a square to start. Sort of, it's going to seem rather thick, but you can gauge it after you get working with it, and overlap the layers slightly. And then we want to start flattening it down right in the center. Use whatever tools you have. If I only have single needles, I'm going to use a 38 star or a 38 spiral, but a multi-needle tool will really be helpful here. You could use this pen tool. Now, if you want a perfect circle, you could cut out a little piece of paper and needle felt around the edges for a template. But in this case, I'm just going to kind of freehand it. And you could also use a punch tool like this one and flatten it down. What we're not trying to do, we're not trying to attach it to the foam, but we are using the foam as a base. And what we're going to do is felt out about the size of the circle that we think we want, which is why I left this hat fairly loose, so we can see, well, this is about what I'm going for. So if you have a circle, a template, or something like that, go ahead and trace around it and see how big you want that to be. And spend a few minutes just kind of flattening this part of the circle, and we'll come right back. Okay, so I've been pressing down the center of my circle here with my clover needle tool, and you can see how that kind of compares to this little hat. What you can do now is peel it off your foam. It shouldn't be overly attached. You can see this side is actually a little bit smoother, even if you hold it up to the light. It's really nice. So when you're felting over foam, you'll notice that underneath side is always getting compaction as well, which is nice. So we're going to go ahead and do both sides, and then what we're going to do is trim that brim in, fold it in, and needle felt it down. And so this is what we'll do, is we'll just fold it over and start to tack it so that it becomes round. So since this is going to be our brim, you want it to be even all the way around. If it's too thin, like if this side is not quite as thick as I need it to be, then I should just patch in some fibers so that it's the same thickness all the way around. So spend a little time turning this brim in and work on flattening it out. We're going to continue working on ours here, making it nice and round and smooth, and use whatever you can as a template, either a piece of paper or a piece of fabric or cutout felt. So we're going to work on ours, and we'll come right back. Okay, so we've been working on our brim a little bit, alternating between using the punch tool, flipping it over and doing that from both sides, and definitely going around the edges and doing the same. And then also using a tool and just going right into the brim. You can continue working on this until you're satisfied with it. You can also tack straight down, but so we're going into the edge and just rounding it out. So I'm feeling pretty good about that right now. I don't want it 100% felted because we need to attach our stovepipe. And so to do that, we are going to use our chenille stem. And if you've seen our basic shapes video, you've seen how we do this, our basic building blocks. So I just start with a little strip of wool, lay my chenille stem right on there, and start to twist. I have it sticking up over the top a little bit. I want that so I can flatten it and making it straight. And then I'm actually going to turn it around and work my way down the stem. So make it as long as you want, and definitely make it a little more bulbous at the base where it is going to attach to the hat, because we want it to kind of flare out. So dry felt it a little bit with your fingers, and then use your felting needle. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and start with my 38 star, and it's kind of lofty, so we're just going to tack right in. We're going to go up and down the entire shaft. I'm going to go straight into the end, and then I'm going to go into the base a little bit as well. I don't want to taper it too much. I actually want to flare it out so that I can then cut this and attach it to the hat. So I do have one that I've been working on a little bit. I've needle felted this one. You can see it's fairly firm. It's stiff at the top. And then you can curve this, or you can go ahead and cut it off at least a little bit. Curve it around, and then we'll attach it here to the base. Curve it around, give it a little bit of a stand, and then we're going to attach it right here to the base of our hat in the center. So flare this part out, and you can cut this off all the way if you want. It doesn't have to be on there really at all, but I don't want it to poke through the bottom. I just want to round it out so that it kind of lays down. So that's perfect. So needle felt this down and add some extra wool to cover up your seam if you have any, and give it, just arch it out. So work on it a little bit, and then we'll add it to our scarecrow. We're almost done. Okay, so we finished our hat by adding some orange around the base and some darker colors, in this case black, to give it a little more of a grubby look. We're going to attach it right after we take care of his hair. You can see that we're just anchoring in the yarns right here into the wool, and I've cut them to different lengths, which makes it a little more playful. It's also fun to stack them a little bit. So how this works is you can just lay your yarns right on. I like to spend a little time getting them right where I want them. I place them actually one at a time would be my preference, but you can anchor them right in, and if you want a little more assistance or to feel a little more secure, then just lay a little bit of wool right on top where they meet the head, and then needle felt that down. So take your time adding the hair so that you know that it's secure, and you might want to add it all the way around the back, and then we're going to attach the hat. So decide which way you want the hat to go, and because it's that stovepipe, you can bend it a little bit. And we're just going to needle felt it down with our 36 gauge needle and attach it right to the top. If you like, you could patch a little bit of wool right under the crown, but we're going to be able to attach this just fine, just by needle felting it right onto the head. So work your way all around the base there. If you want to clean it up after you're done, go with a different gauge needle, and you can always patch more wool on top. That's the brilliant thing, especially about working with the batting. And you can spend a time even getting it into shape. So we're going to keep working on our guy a little bit, and hope you will work on yours as well. We hope you have fun with this project, and we hope you'll share pictures of what you needle felt with us. So until next time, here's our little trio of scarecrows, and we wish you great fun making yours. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Marie Spalding of Living Felt. We wish you a great day, and as always, happy felting.